Hello everybody, I hope everyone is really well. In this video, we are going to look at diet breaks and the Matador study. This topic came up recently in my master's group in one of our group calls. So people had a lot of questions about it and I wanted to go into a bit more detail. What part of my job is teaching people all the different tools you can use on your fat loss or your health journey, because the journey is never static ever. You're constantly changing. You might plateau, you might have a vacation come up, you hit your goal or you hit your maintenance. Then what do? What's the next diet once you've hit your maintenance? What if you plateau? Do we need to reverse diet? So there's all these different tools. People have heard of like different eating templates and eating styles, but most people don't consider tools that can be used along the way. I think people have heard generally of carb cycling, maybe refeeding for sure. I know my clients have heard of refeeding, reverse dieting. I've spoken about that a lot. But I don't think many people have really heard of diet breaks, because the idea of, oh, I can take a break from my diet, to most people is like, whoa, hold on, how come I didn't know this? So it's not as simple as you would think. There's a caveat. There's always a caveat. So we're going to look at this a bit now and the research around it. So diet breaks are periods of a week or more at maintenance or above, depending on the person. It's usually eating at maintenance calories, and there's usually an increase on the scale during this time because you're eating more food. So it's not fat gain, it's the fact that you're eating more food, but you're still at maintenance, so it's not fat gain. So food is going to cause you to retain weight in your intestines, retain water, fill up glycogen stores in your muscle. So, but there is some research around this. So I want to look at that first before we go into kind of application and considerations. So there's the main study that kind of brought diet breaks to light is called the Matador study. And Matador stands for minimizing adaptive thermogenesis and deactivating obesity rebound. And it refers to a study that was published back in 2017 by Byrne and colleagues. And I will share the link in the description for the study. Yeah, you can find it on PubMed as well if you just type in the Matador study. And this study featured two groups, with each group following a weight loss diet. So group 1 followed the diet for 16 consecutive weeks with a caloric intake set to 67% below their maintenance requirements. So they basically had a 33% deficit. Throughout the study, those maintenance calories, they were frequently recalculated and adjusted to ensure that the diet provided the energy intake deficit as they went on, because like I mentioned, your journey is never static. The more weight you lose, the more you're going to have to adjust for those calories as well. So then group 2, they followed the same weight loss diet, but they had a bit of a twist. So they consumed 67% of their maintenance calories for 2 weeks, and then they consumed 100% of their maintenance calories for 2 weeks. And then they alternated back and forth. So 2 weeks at deficit, 2 weeks at maintenance. So group 2, they still did 16 weeks of dieting, but it took them twice as long because they also did 16 weeks of diet breaks. So in total, it was like 32 weeks with that ratio of 1-to-1 between the deficit and the break. So 1-to-1 being 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off kind of thing. So over the course of the study, both groups consumed the weight loss diet for 16 weeks. So overall, their caloric deficit was theoretically equivalent between the groups. However, their actual results were not equivalent. There was quite a difference. So the group with the diet breaks, so both groups did lose weight. Both groups saw progress. But the group that did the diet breaks, Even though it did take them twice as long, they still were only dieting for 16 weeks though. They lost more fat, they lost more weight overall, but they lost more body fat. They had smaller degree of change in their metabolic rate, so there was less metabolic adaptation. They also kept off more of that body fat than the group that dieted straight through for 16 weeks when they went back to their normal life, which is very important. Their basal metabolic rate was also better and had less of a decrease than group 1 did. So that's very important because BMR is a big part of metabolism. So overall, group 2 with the diet breaks, they had way better results. And now the concept of diet group, although it might be kind of new to general population, it's not new in the health industry, especially not in the bodybuilding world. Diet breaks have been used for decades in bodybuilding and contest prep, along with like refeeding and carb cycling. The justification might be a little bit different between those and your average person. Like if you were bodybuilding or if you're in contest prep, let's say that you're an athlete and you've kind of got ahead of your schedule, then you can kind of get away with a break for a week or two. Whereas someone else just on a fat loss campaign, they might use a diet break for like a psychological break, because we can get diet fatigue from constantly being in these energy deficits and wash, rinse, repeat. So really can help there with that psychological aspect. Diet breaks can also help with social events, vacations, stuff like that. So this study, the Matador study, it not only provides tightly controlled data on the topic, but also shifts that perspective from which we have around diets and, oh, I could potentially take a diet break and it would play in my favor and not against me if I do it correctly. So diet breaks could be a very valuable tool for you or someone you know. So rather than something that you can afford because you're ahead of your schedule with your fat loss, more look at it like this is a tool I may need to use a few times on my journey. So how would we apply something like that? Well, like anything, there's a caveat. There's always a caveat. So a diet break doesn't mean that you can eat whatever you want. You do not have free reign. It's a break from the deficit, but not a break from like caring about what you eat, basically. So a properly implemented diet break involves raising your calories from a deficit to your estimated maintenance level. And we say estimate because we can only estimate your maintenance requirements. We'll never get absolute precision. So you'll inevitably be a little bit high or a little bit low, but the goal is to be as accurate as possible. If you're tracking in, say, chronometer, or if you're using a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or a Whoop or something that tracks your daily caloric expenditure, and even chronometer, you're tracking what you're eating over a week or two and your weight's not moving, or your calorie expenditure on your metabolic tracker is the same and your weight's not moving, that's going to give you a pretty accurate idea of your maintenance because you're using the same tracking method. So it's going to be accurate for you whether or not the number is accurate up and down, the same as we discussed when we're weighing or tracking body fat. So that's going to give you that idea, and then you can then adjust your calories from there. So a diet break does not mean that you get to eat loads of junk food or sugar either, or even alcohol, because if you were to do something like that, it's most likely going to make it a lot harder for you to get back on track when those deficit weeks come back around. So and then of course, if you do go crazy and eat ad libitum, you're most likely going to put the weight back on that you lost plus more, and I do discuss that in a lot more depth in my video on body fat set point to help you understand the hormones change, the metabolic adaptation that happens, your fat cells shrink, you rebound, blah blah blah. So this study really suggests that diet breaks may facilitate continued fat loss throughout long haul fat loss journeys or campaigns, even cutting phases, bulking phases, contest prep, as I mentioned. There is a lot of research. Since this study came out in 2017, there has been a lot more research around the benefits of refeeding and carb cycling and manipulating your calories to help support metabolic adaptation and performance and all that sort of. So we do need a lot more research. How could we phase this? Who is this going to work for? How would we time something like this? But all of the research around these kind of things seems to be very beneficial as long as it's done correct, if that makes sense. So right now, from a fat loss perspective, the research suggests that this may be helpful to add in 1 to 2 weeks of maintenance calories every couple of weeks or months for fat loss consistency and results. So the way it works though is if you're obese and you have a lot of weight to lose, you're not going to be able to have as many diet breaks as someone who is leaner. Someone who is leaner, it's probably going to be more beneficial to them to have more frequent diet breaks because they are leaner, which means their leptin is lower, their insulin sensitivity is down. They also have a change in their metabolic adaptation, but also because they're leaner, there is more of a chance that they're going to lose lean body mass when they're in constant deficits. And that, when we talk about lean body mass, most people think of muscle, but no, your organs as well are made up of lean body mass. So we do want to be careful. That won't happen if you have more body fat compared to lean body mass, because the chances of you even touching lean body mass are slim because you're just going to use the extra fat for energy. So this approach, it can be another very useful tool, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose. Like if you have 100 pounds or more to lose, that can take a long time, especially if you're doing it right and you want to keep it off forever. So having these planned breaks, which I think people already kind of do when they go on vacation or they do a wedding or whatever they do, but I don't know if they had specifically planned it as a diet break, more so they knew this event was coming up. But it can really help with sustainability and help to prevent the diet fatigue, help with vacations. But if you're going to do something like this, it would be best to work with someone who is literate around the topic of diet breaks, of refeeding, of how the metabolism works, how you want to work with someone who can recognize if you're at a real plateau or if you just think you're at a plateau. So doing something like this, if you try to do it yourself, yeah, it could be done, but chances are most people are going to end up kidding themselves or doing it wrong. So you do need the whole tracking method, you do need the accountability, you do need someone to tell you. Anyway, so that brings us to where I am now and how I am going to implement a diet break. So tomorrow we leave for a 3-week vacation. We only planned it back in January. So when we planned it, I had 6 weeks to come up with a plan. So I was like, okay, I'm going to bring in a diet break for the weeks that we're away. So that doesn't mean I'm going to eat like a lunatic or binge on everything while I'm away, because I won't do that. Because when you've been on your journey for so long, like I have, you do get sick of food after a while. But also, like, you can't shake being cognizant of your choices. And I'm more of a picker when I'm away. I want to try the new foods rather than sit down and have huge meals. I, like, generally don't have breakfast or lunch when we travel because I would rather pick at stuff. I want to try different things. And then we usually will have that bigger meal in the evening and that's it. So I'm still kind of practicing my timed restricted feeding. We're going to be walking a lot. So I know the calories are going to equate for the calories I take in, so calories out. So I'm interested to see, because I'll be doing a lot more walking than I do in Alberta, especially in the winter. But my plan was, okay, well, I'm going to need to be in a calorie deficit for these next 6 weeks coming up to my vacation. So my plan was, I need to be in a deficit, but I want to build as much muscle as I can. So I needed to account for the calorie deficit, but also equate for protein so I could still build the muscle. I had to plan in my training sessions, my sleep, my supplements, even my refeeds. I was still having refeeds to prevent any sort of adaptation. I've spoken about how I've had hypothyroid in the past, so I always have to be cognizant of that as well. Lucky for me, I put on muscle like very easy. Part of that is genetics. So over the 6 weeks, I was able to put on quite a nice amount of muscle. I meant to go back and get a scan done today, but you know, that hustle before you get on a plane, so I didn't have time today. But I'll do when I come back, see where my body fat and muscle mass percentage is. The last time I checked my lean body mass percentage was like 79 or something. It was quite high. But when someone can put on a lot of muscle or mass easily, that mass includes body fat. So if I can put on muscle easy, I can put on body fat easy. So you have to be aware of this balancing act that has to happen. So I put on the muscle, I lost body fat. So now I have extra muscle when I'm away that's going to burn in my favor towards my basal metabolic rate and help kind of partition the nutrients that I take into the muscles more so than fat. And then I also I have that kind of flexibility. I lost some body fat, I gained some muscle. I have a bit of flexibility now where I can sit back and be like, okay, I worked my ass off. I have this kind of range that I can stay within and be comfortable and not feel guilty or anything like that. And then when I come back, I'll have had this nice break and a break from that diet fatigue as well, which I very much experience along with work and life fatigue and training fatigue. And then this break will also be a reset for me. I do good with resets. I need a break, which I reset on, and then I come back and I go hard again. So that will be working towards the summer bodies. So I hope this makes sense to you about diet breaks and how they may be a valuable tool for you or someone that you know. If you've any questions, of course, reach out to me. Let me know. I'll answer as best I can. I'll post the study in the description, and I hope you found this helpful, and I'll chat to you guys real soon. Bye.